Lisa Nine is the Preparedness Officer for FEMA National Programs Grants, and Alexander Mrazek is the Branch Chief for FEMA Homeland Security Grants Program. So we've got two experts to talk about this.
All right.
Thanks.
Okay, so hello everybody. This is Lisa Nine. I didn't even show my video, but thank you for the assistance. So I wanted to say thank you first for inviting me and Alex from the Preparedness Grants Division at FEMA headquarters to discuss the grant programs that are eligible for possible funding for IPAWS. We have funded quite a bit in the Emergency Management Performance Grant. So I'm going to talk a little bit about EMPG and then the Tribal Homeland Security Grant Program. IPAWS is an eligible funding area as well. We have some key information about dates and things that have actually just passed for the FY22 application period, but most of our time frames are cyclical and our processes are cyclical in the Preparedness Grants Division. So with the exception of the late appropriations this year for FY22 funding, we should be pretty close to these same dates next year, which gives you some time to reach out and discuss your needs with either FEMA directly, or if it's for the Emergency Management Performance Grant, if you're a direct recipient, you can include it in your application, or if you're a potential subrecipient, you can apply through your state or territory emergency management agency. I'll also talk about the FEMA Authorized Equipment List website, which gives you direct information on which grant programs fund IPAWS, and I'll also give you our points of contact information and leave some time for questions and discussion at the end. So with that, I'll go to the next slide, which is an overview of the Emergency Management Performance Grant for FY22. I will say, for those of you who aren't familiar with this program, it is really the foundational grant program for emergency managers across the United States. It's been around since the 1950s. The format in which it exists now and the program goals and things are really very similar to what it's been for a long time, particularly during the 1990s under President Clinton's administration, and James Lee Witt was the FEMA administrator, when we really set some of the parameters by which we consider projects eligible and funding for emergency management at the state, territory, tribal, local, county level across the country. Our priorities are closing capability gaps and also building and sustaining, a lot of it is sustaining, capabilities within states and territories across the country so that they are reducing risk. And those risks are identified in their THIRA, which is the Threat and Hazard Identification Risk Assessment. It's a process that FEMA uses to really standardize the identification of risks. And then the SPR process is where the stakeholder, i.e. the state or territory emergency management agency, designates those capability gaps that they want to try to address this next year in funding. So that's an overview of kind of what our objectives are and really what we're trying to address with the MPG funding. We got the same amount of funding this year as we did last year, with the exception of $50 million in addition, and that was part of the last fall, the October supplemental grant that Congress gave us that was not expected, but it was really in response to all the disasters that were going on last fall and the need that emergency managers and communities across the nation really had. So we had additional funding. Since it was in the supplemental, it was part of the 21 award, but we are including it in what we're awarding this year for 22. Our period of performance is 36 months, 3 years on EMPG grants, and we award directly from FEMA to eligible state or territory governments. And that will either be the state administrative agency, the SAA, which in most cases is the state agency that a governor designates as the one that will manage the Homeland Security Grant Program and some of the preparedness programs that Alex will talk about, or it could be the state's emergency management agency, and we will fund directly to the SAA, and they pass it through, the 100% of it, to the Emergency Management Agency, or we fund direct to the State Emergency Management Agency. But it's direct funding to them. And then if they determine that they want to subgrant that money, they will make that available and advertise that in an application process, very much like what we do at FEMA. And they will make that funding available, determine the priorities, announce those to eligible local, tribal, and county jurisdictions and state agencies as well across their states and territories. There'll be an application period, and then they'll make subgrant awards. So some states and territories subgrant this money, not all do. Some states and territories retain the funding completely at that state or territory level. So that is determined by that state or territory. We don't make those determinations. So if you are a potential county or local or tribal jurisdiction and you're interested in trying to seek IPAWS, you want to get money for training or the implementation of the IPAWS system, or fees to participate in it, recurring fees, things like that, or planning for it, that is something you would need to contact your state emergency management agency or territory and ask them if they do subgrant that money and when is their application period for those subawards. The Tribal Homeland Security Grant is another program where we will fund IPAWS. It's an eligible category for funding. We provide money in Tribal Homeland Security directly to eligible tribes. And these are tribes that are directly eligible from the Homeland Security Act. And there are various parts of the statute that designate what tribes have to meet in order to be eligible. And we come up with a list, and of course those tribes apply for funding. We are right in the middle of that process of review right now. So we again got the same amount of money as last year. We have $15 million this year to award. We will be making those announcements very soon. We had very good applications this year for Tribal Homeland Security grant funding, and I didn't see anything necessarily related to IPAWS, but I do know that a lot of the tribes are interested in doing planning for emergency management, and of course it has to have a terrorism aspect to it, and including that as well as some of the national priorities. So it's an eligible funding area, and if you are a tribal jurisdiction that is eligible to apply next year, I would encourage you to include any kinds of costs that you are interested in including in an application and apply for the funding. We held 5 webinars for tribal jurisdictions this year for the Tribal Homeland Security Grant Program, and they were well attended. So we set national priority areas, but again, those projects that include IPAWS would be eligible as well. You would just probably want to include that as part of a project that addresses a national priority area, because as you see on the screen, if you address a national priority area, like combating domestic violent extremism is one, or enhancing information systems and intelligence and information sharing in the law enforcement arena, and including even Homeland Security and Department of Homeland Security in those plans and procedures, you'll get an additional 20 points when we do the panel review. So that's something to keep in mind. And the Tribal Homeland Security Program is a 36-month, it says 36 months and years. It should have been 36 months, 3 years. It's a period of performance. So it's a 3-year grant period. We sometimes provide extensions, but we really do encourage people to plan for 3 years. The next slide is really a list of and a calendar of dates, key periods that we go through. And again, these are cyclical in our preparedness programs. So you can expect these dates or similar dates next year to be available for the FY23 funding if both of these programs are in the FY23 appropriations that Congress passes. We did have a little bit of a delay this year with the congressional appropriations for our FY22 money. So it did not necessarily change the announcement date, but it did shorten the application period this year, because we have to make our awards no later than the end of this fiscal year, which is September 30th for both of these programs. So We released the NOFO, the Notice of Funding Opportunity for EMPG this year on April 13th. And a month later, with the rest of the preparedness programs, except for a regional catastrophic, we released the NOFO for the Tribal Homeland Security grant period. But as you see, EMPG had 2 months to apply. They had a little bit of an advantage. And the Tribal Homeland Security grant period was only open for a month. And those deadlines are strict in fairness, because the Tribal Homeland Security grant program is actually a competitive program. So we have to make a level playing field, and that's important. But it also is important so we have time to evaluate the proposals, and that includes our evaluation programmatically and financially. Some projects and some programs require panel reviews, and some are evaluated at the regional level. So that provides us time to be able to do all of that, and then again, get those awards out no later than September 30th. So if, for example, when we make these awards for FY22 EMPG and Tribal, those periods of performance, the 36 months, they'll start and be 3 years. So these were the periods of time last year. We will update the projected period of performance this year when we get ready to make those awards. So they will be, October 1st, 2022, when we make our next award, and then 2025 will be the end of the 3-year period of performance. So right now I'm going to ask a poll question, and I don't know if I need to show this on the slide or you're going to put that up, but here's the question: which types of agencies are eligible for direct funding from FEMA for the Emergency Managed Performance Grant?
And Lisa, that poll is open right now for about
Perfect.
another 45 seconds.
Sounds good. All right. So do we have the results?
It's WebEx is making me wait 3, 2, 1 to share it.
Okay, I see it.
Okay, there we go. I'll
All
share
right,
it.
so we have the answer is C, state emergency management agencies or state administrative agencies. And the reason is because counties and tribes and local jurisdictions, as well as other state agencies, they have to apply to as a subgrant to the State Emergency Management Agency, or SAA. But we make our awards to letter C. Those are the only ones we make direct awards to. So if you are interested as a county emergency management agency, a tribal jurisdiction, you're certainly eligible if that state or territory subgrants the money. So thank you for asking. That was a little tricky, and I see it did catch some people in that, which is what I was trying to do. So we're clear, because that is something that a lot of people are confused about is, do we fund directly to counties? And we do not do that with EMPG. Okay. So the next is the FEMA authorized equipment list. So this is a website, very helpful, I think. I wish I'd had this. My background is from the state SAA, actually, in South Carolina, managing Homeland Security. And then we pass through the funding to emergency management, the State Emergency Management Agency. But again, I wish we'd had this back then. We had a notice of funding opportunity, a paper copy, and we used to have to keep looking up equipment. But this website is really great, and you click on the website. I've got the link in this. Once you click on that AEL, we call it, you will see the list of approved equipment types, and there are also supplies on there. There are protective clothing types of items. There's all kinds of things that are not necessarily what you would call equipment, but if it's eligible, the item will be eligible. They will list the item number and also the grant program for which it's eligible. So that's what's also helpful as well. So for IPAWS, this program would fall under the public notification and warning systems. And I've actually given you the direct link, the website to the direct link on the AEL for that system. And the description, as you see here, is really any type of public warning system. And we even include IPAWS in there. So we let people know IPAWS is eligible, and it's eligible. And then you will see under the list of the description, they will show you the programs. And I just wrote them in this last bullet. It is eligible for funding under EMPG and Tribal Homeland Security. However, the fees that are related to support the system are the responsibility of the jurisdiction and not allowable. So that's something you would have to make sure that you did not include in a grant application, because money we send to a state or territory emergency management agency to then subgrant, they cannot also make that eligible for county and local jurisdictions and tribes that they subgrant money to. So we can pay for training, and I've looked at the list of things that we've paid for in the past. We can, and that's a lot of the projects for EMPG have been funding training on IPAWS. Equipment to get it started, and the information system, that technology that's involved in putting it into an EOC, an Emergency Operations Center, for example, all of that is eligible. So if you want to include that in an application, again, you would need to, if you're a county or a local or tribal jurisdiction and you want to apply as a subgrantee, you would need to check on that with your state or territory emergency management agency, or SAA. If you are a state or territory emergency management agency, as most of you already know, when you apply for EMPG money, you'd be negotiating those types of costs with your regional EMPG program manager. The next slide are the points of contact, and we are in the National Programs Branch in the Preparedness Grants Division. Alex, who's the speaker after this, is in another branch of the Preparedness Grants Division. My branch chief is Brian Willis. My section chief is Julie Vernetti. And Cornelius Jackson is my colleague. He is the National Program Manager for the Tribal Homeland Security Grant Program. In fact, he's in South Dakota this week monitoring one of the tribal grants. And I'm hoping he's having a great time, because it's always nice to get out into the field and meet the people that we fund and get to see the actual projects firsthand. And I am the National Program Manager for EMPG. So if you have questions, here are our email addresses. We also are glad for you to send an email directly to the program mailboxes, and I have those here. And then I've provided a link to both programs. So again, even though the time has passed for applying for these two programs with FEMA, there is eligibility to, so I would encourage you at the state agencies that aren't the SA or Emergency Management Agency. I'd also encourage the county jurisdictions that are here, the locals, also tribal jurisdictions, to look on this website and contact your state SAA or your state emergency management agency. Find out if they're making subgrant awards for EMPG and when those application periods would be coming open, because they should be coming open very soon. And you might be able to include a project or project, some type of funding for IPAWS in those subgrants for this year, so you wouldn't miss out on that opportunity. And then, of course, next year, Tribal Homeland Security, that competitive program will be coming around, and probably in the middle of this, spring, middle of May, beginning or middle of May, we will be putting out an announcement again about the Emergency Management Performance Grant and Tribal. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen, if I can figure out how to do that now. Or maybe you could do that.
Yeah, I'm going to pass it over to Alex.
Okay. I was going
to close this out on grants.
I was actually, did you want me to take questions now on these, or?
I think we're going to have to keep moving forward, Lisa. We're a little bit behind, but we can make it up. Hi, Alex.
Okay.
Hello. Hello.
Thank you, Lisa.
Everybody.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, and I will, a lot of the information I'm going to share, say redundant, but applies to the programs that I oversee. So let me just bring up the slide deck here. And right. All right, everybody should be able to see that. So thank you, everybody, for allowing me to take a few minutes of your time today to talk about some of our grant programs. I work closely with Lisa. Matter of fact, I've known Lisa for probably 15 or 16 years and have worked with the programs that she manages currently. So the branch that I oversee at FEMA is within grant programs, and it's called the Homeland Security Programs Branch. And within that branch, we have the, say, the signature, the main largest funded preparedness program, which is called the Homeland Security Grant Program, or HSGP. And under that program, or within that program, there are three subcomponents or carve-outs of funding, those being the State Homeland Security Program, the Urban Area Security Initiative, and Operation Stone Garden. The two I want to talk about today, which are most relevant to IPAWS and alerting initiatives, projects in general, are the State Homeland Security Program and the Urban Area Security Initiative. So the agenda follows pretty much the same along as what Lisa had previously presented with EMPG and the tribal program. I'm just going to go through an overview of the three components of the Homeland Security Grant Program, again, focusing on the first two bullets, the State Homeland Program and the Urban Area Program. Go through our grant cycle, our timeline, which shows the key dates and how we progress from when we get an appropriation to when we make awards. Provide some points of contact for our programs, and then open to any questions and discussion. So let's see here, next slide. So for the Homeland Security Grant Program, this year, and looking at the funding summary on the right-hand corner, or right-hand side, just comparing last year to this year, it was the same. We had the same funding level. The total program came to just over $1.1 billion. If you add up the three funding allocations within the program, and that's a significant amount of money that goes out to the states, and then further goes out to local governments to enact state and local preparedness initiatives. So for the state and the urban area portions of the program, we, beginning back in 2020, so this is the third year that we've been doing this, we've required the states are the only applicants, just like with EMPG that Lisa talked about. The state applies for the grant, and then the state manages the grant to the locals. They make the subawards to the locals, and then FEMA manages the grant with the state. So that's how the management of the program works. But needless to say, there was a requirement put in place back in 2020, and it's remained in place for the last 3 years of the program, in which the Secretary of Homeland Security, by statute, is the ultimate decision maker on the priorities of the program and where he or she feels, based on intelligence, current events, et cetera, where funding should be, federal funding should be used. And this year we had, you'll see it on the screen here, list of what we call national priorities, call them NPAs, national priority areas. And in some cases, the ones with percentages next to them, there are requirements for states to submit projects that total 3% of their total amount that they're getting with the program. They have to dedicate 3% of their funding towards soft targets, crowded places, intelligence, information sharing, domestic violence, extremism, and community preparedness and resilience. There are the other two national priorities at the top. There is no minimum spend requirement. And obviously the ones with the spend requirement, the minimum spend requirement can exceed that 3%. The other changes prior to 2020, FEMA did not initially review every single project that came into us. The state was the lead in determining what projects would be funded and would not be funded. However, with the national priorities designated by the secretary, FEMA does review all of the national priority projects and makes a determination whether they're effective, not effective, and or if they need to be revised, rewritten, etc. And funding can be placed on hold if ineffective projects are found or our projects are deemed ineffective. I can tell you at this point, after 3 years of this process, we have very few that end up being ineffective or funding placed on hold. Folks have gotten pretty good at writing good projects and having them pass the review process the first time. Going on to the next slide here. This just breaks it down by the individual subprograms. Again, this is the State Homeland Program. This funding goes to how I like to look at it is the non-big cities. So all of your rural areas that are not that populous, that don't have maybe the iconic or the significant risk as the average person might think of being a target for a terrorist attack or other situation that may necessitate the use of our funds. So this funding, again, is awarded to the state, and the state is required to pass this funding to those rural local units of government once it's received within X amount of time by statute. So they cannot hold on to it. It has to get passed through. It's a statutory requirement. Congress wrote that specifically in the law. It's been in the law since the inception of the program. So that's what this portion of the HSGP program goes towards. It goes towards the non-big cities. And there's some language in here that talks about how there's certain minimums of increase. So in the statute for the program, the Congress defines certain floor of how much a state, the minimum a state can receive, and how much a territory can receive. However, because we have another program that we're not talking about today called the Nonprofit Security Grant Program, or NSGP, that comes out of the same allocation that Congress gives us, and that had a substantial increase in it. That raised the formula, and as a result, the minimum that the states and territories get went up slightly compared to 2021. But other than that, there were no changes to the State Homeland Program. Similarly, from the State Homeland Program to the Urban Area Program, the Urban Area.
Hi, Alex, it's Justin. Just wanted to jump in. I want to give you a couple-minute warning. We're going to have to move on to the next session in just a few minutes.
I will go quick. So the Urban Area Program, same situation as the State Homeland Program, only it goes to the big cities. This year, 36 of the largest urban areas were selected based on risk and ultimately secretarial decision. And that funding goes through the state to those big cities for the same types of initiatives. Our grant timeline on the next slide. we're already past most of this. The big date is that the secretary will be making his announcement back. I went all the way through. Secretary will be making his announcement in middle of August, once all of our reviews and allocations are final. And two quick things. For those of you who heard Lisa talk about the authorized equipment list, that also applies to our programs. Our programs are listed in there for allowability of equipment. And final thing I'll say is the best resource is FEMA.gov/grants, and the preparedness grants section has all updated information on all of the programs, all of the contacts, all of the state contacts. My contact information is up on the screen, and that is it.